So is there a reason that you don't do this ride when you go to Universal?
I'm more of a thrill ride guy. That's not really up my alley.
I'm just not really a fan of kiddie rides. I don't like baby rides.
I just like to stay in Islands of Adventure.
It's kind of an old attraction.
I'm just not as big of a fan of it as a lot of people are, you know? Some of it actually scares me.
Hello everybody, it is me, Vincent, and welcome to another VincentVision. Watch out! In today's video, I want to ride the movies with you all and take you through a deep dive on a classic Universal attraction. In fact, some would say this is the most classic of the classic Universal rides. It's E.T. Adventure. This ride is a big part of the park's history, and I want to take you through its creation, talk about the man who made E.T., reasons why this ride might still be in the park 30 years later, and do my best to try to explain what exactly is going on in the second half of this ride. This ride gets a lot of love from big Universal fans like me and you watching this video, but sometimes I worry that first-time visitors and the general public don't give E.T. Adventure the attention it deserves. So I'm kind of hoping that those people stumble upon this video as well and learn a thing or two about the only opening day ride left in the park. Let's get started. Universal Studios Hollywood has existed in California as a movie studio as far back as 1915. Interestingly enough, the first ever movie filmed at Universal Studios was actually a year before the lot opened up in 1914. It was called Damon and Pythias, and it was a silent film based off the Greek legend of the same name. Now, this doesn't really have anything to do with E.T. other than to cement the fact that Universal has been making movies for a very long time, and they are responsible for some of the most iconic and classic films of the generations. Things like the monster movies, right? Dracula, Frankenstein, Wolfman, even some modern stuff like Jurassic Park, Back to the Future, and as silly as it is to kind of admit it, things like the Minions and Fast and Furious, no matter what you think about those movies, they are a part of daily pop culture, and they are also Universal movies. But there is one man in Universal's past and present who is responsible for making some of the biggest movies of all time, and that is, of course, Steven Spielberg. Spielberg has been a Universal legend for a very long time. He actually used to sneak into the Universal Studios backlot when he was 16 and eventually got himself a job there. He worked his way up as a movie director and got a 4-year picture deal with Universal in 1975, and from there on is when we started to see some of his greatest work. Jaws in 1975, Jurassic Park in 1993, and of course, E.T. the Extraterrestrial in 1982. E.T. is one of his most famous movies, and Steven Spielberg himself considers E.T. to be his most perfect movie. These films helped solidify Steven's legend status at Universal as a movie director, but in 1986, he would soon earn another title, Executive Creative Consultant. In June 1990, Universal Studios Florida, the first major expansion of Universal outside of California, opens. This was their attempt at creating a theme park experience similar to Walt Disney World, which opened in 1971. The difference would be that the park would function as both a theme park for guests to visit and a working movie studio. When Universal Florida first opened up, there was a lot of filming happening inside the park, and in more modern times, the resort has shifted more to like a theme park experience, a vacation experience, but really a lot of that in-park filming that happened at the beginning years of Universal Florida was kind of in part thanks to Steven Spielberg. He helped design the park in a way that the back lot, an area of Universal Hollywood that's used for filming and typically off limits for guests, would be the main guest areas in Florida. So guests would be able to visit the park and see filming while they were on vacation. Kind of like how it used to be when silent movies were filmed at Universal. But this wasn't his greatest contribution to the park. It was actually him allowing Universal to use his movies as rides in the park. Jaws, the Jurassic Park Island and Islands of Adventure, and of course, yet again, E.T. Adventure. The first version of this ride opened at Universal Studios Florida on its opening day and was replicated in California 1 year later in 1991 and at Universal Studios Japan in 2001. It now remains as the only ride left from when the park first opened in 1990, and it is now the only E.T. ride left at any Universal park. And why is that, you think? Universal has a habit of replacing classic rides, and they kind of have to with the space that they have. But why, out of everything that's been taken away, does E.T. specifically get to stay? Well, the legend is because of Steven Spielberg himself. One of the longest running tall tales is that Universal can never get rid of the ET ride because it is in Steven Spielberg's contract as executive creative consultant. And if it were ever to get removed, Steven could retaliate by getting the other rides based off his properties removed from the park, which means we would have a very big dinosaur-sized hole missing at Islands of Adventure. This is the running theory as to why the ride hasn't been touched all these years, and while in reality we don't really know what happens behind the scenes with contracts or how truthful it really is, ET Adventure has entertained and enchanted millions of guests with movie ride magic for over 30 years. Now, there was a competitive aspect to the opening of Universal Studios Florida. This was Universal's first foray into the major theme park space in Orlando, and the current CEO of Disney at the time, Michael Eisner, played kind of a dirty trick on them by opening Disney's MGM Studios a year earlier in 1989. But that is a topic for another video. ET Adventure was the ride that would attempt to challenge something Disney was very good at: family rides. The movie park was already slated to have some exciting and even sort of scary rides like Jaws and Confrontation, while also having more informative behind-the-scenes looks into how movies are made with things like the Alfred Hitchcock exhibit and Murder, She Wrote. Universal wanted E.T. to be the park's Pirates of the Caribbean, or It's a Small World, which was a slow-moving, immersive ride that transported you to another world, or in E.T.'s case, another planet. Originally, there were some pretty wild ideas for the ride. Gary Goddard, a theme park designer who was involved with the creation of Universal Studios Florida, suggested that the first half of the ride have guests fly on their bicycles to the Green Planet, where they would then get off and explore, kind of like Tom Sawyer's Island at Magic Kingdom. Ultimately, the ride opted to focus on the relationship element of the E.T. story. Like the connection between Elliot and E.T., you too would have a personal moment with him, as riders were responsible for getting E.T. back to his home planet on flying bike ride vehicles, which were built by the very popular ride manufacturer Intamin, who also did the Velocicoaster and Hagrid's Motorbike Adventure, which are two completely different rides from E.T. How do you make it look like you're flying over the forest and cities? Well, it's very simple. You put the track for the ride up on the ceiling. That's what gives the illusion of flight on E.T. Adventure, and there are some points of the ride when you're pretty high up with nothing around you. I wanted to talk about the ride vehicles because this is one of my favorite little pictures that's been on my computer for a while. This is a picture that came from the Universal Studios Hollywood Ride Operator Manual for the E.T. ride on how to evacuate guests from the ride, and I just love E.T. in his little team member outfit there. You go, E.T., get them off the ride safely. Of course, what would an E.T. ride be without flying on bikes? But did you know that when the ride first opened, you could actually also end up riding on a spaceship? The wheelchair-accessible ride vehicle for E.T. was a big spaceship, and existed for a couple years until it got removed due to guest complaints of not being able to see the ride very well from it. But an immersive ride experience doesn't start at the ride vehicle, does it? It actually starts before that, in the queue. After Steven Spielberg sets up the plot of the ride and you get your intergalactic passports, you enter what is probably the most popular Universal queue, the Redwood Forest. This line is just chef's kiss perfect. The darkness of the room makes it look like the tree trunks are towering above you, and it really gives you the sensation of being in a forest at night. There are some great visuals in here, but we cannot talk about the E.T. queue if we do not mention the smell, the iconic E.T. smell. It has been described in a lot of different ways. Some have called it forest smell, pine trees, eucalyptus. Some people like to call it old mildew. Whatever it actually is, it is a smell that is so popular it has been replicated many times by a ton of different internet candle companies. According to my research though, the actual manufacturers of the ET smell is a company called Scent Air, and I've looked on their website to see if I could find reviews that describe certain smells like the ET ride, but I haven't been able to find any. If you're able to find it on the Scent Air website, please let us know down below in the comments, because I'm sure we would all love to see that. Something I do know is that they absolutely on purpose pump that smell through the building. In fact, a very long time ago, a kind ET team member showed me one of the pumps. Now, I obviously couldn't take a picture of it, but they do have some pumps under the computers in the passport room. So they want you to smell that classic smell. Apart from the smell, there are actually a lot of things to look out for while you're going through this queue. As soon as you enter, if you look up to the right, you'll see some astronauts up above. I think they're easy to hear as you're going through that part of the queue, but sometimes people don't look immediately to the right, and there they are. Sometimes in the trees, there's a faint red glowing light, and that's meant to be E.T. running through the forest away from the astronauts. There are also a few woodland creatures tucked in the queue as well that are fun to look for, including 2 rabbits and an owl. The rabbits are a reference to the opening scene of E.T. when all of the E.T. aliens are looking for plants. The first rabbit is in the standard queue on the right-hand side, right before you see E.T.'s teacher Botanicus, which we'll talk about a little bit later. And the second one, you can see when you are going into the second load platform, there's kind of like a little cave that you walk into, it's right above you. And the owl sits right above the entrance to the express line. There's also the speak and spell that E.T. uses in the movie to phone home that some people have told me is the actual one from the movie. You know, when Universal Studios Florida first opened up, a lot of screen-used props were used in the park to sell it as a real movie studio. In fact, they used to have a whole boneyard with just props from old movies. So it is possible, but who knows? Once you've gotten through the queue, it is time to head into the forest on your bikes to save the green planet. Now, if you want to feel like the main character of the ride and have E.T. on your bike, you need to be sitting in the front row on the second seat. This is where you're going to have E.T.'s basket, where he actually lifts his head up at the beginning of the ride. He's riding alongside you through the forest, and then he goes down and disappears once you arrive in the green planet because, well, he's home. This is something that's really easy to miss if you're sitting in the back row. This ride is really unique at Universal because it is one of the few rides to feature no screens. Sally Dark Rides is an animatronic company that created the 300 animatronics and plants from the Green Planet that are featured on this ride. And that's a combination of the flashlights in the forest, the owls hooting, all the baby ETs. Basically anything that moves is considered an animatronic. My favorite out of all of them is this little guy here banging on the space drums with his big bright lights. But there is an interesting story with another figure on the ride that I'll let you decide for yourself whether you think is true or not. In 1982, the E.T. movie soundtrack was released with music by the amazing John Williams and also Michael Jackson. Michael Jackson narrated the storybook record for the E.T. movie. Basically, this was Michael Jackson going through the plot of the movie with dialogue from the film. It came out in November of 1982, which is the same month that another one of Michael Jackson's albums came out. What was it called? Oh, right, Thriller. And supposedly as a reference to the MJ connection, the police that's driving the cop car that comes out right before you fly over the city bears a striking resemblance to the famous pop star. He's got the big aviators on, he's got a sharp jaw, a sharp nose. Could be a coincidence, could be on purpose. What do you guys think? Speaking of flying, we are now at the magic moment of this ride, flying over what's known as Vista City. This model town has 3,340 miniature buildings, 250 cars, 1,000 streetlights with over 4,000 stars above it. One of my favorite details is the baseball game that's going on, and I also love the way the ocean looks in this scene. This large model took 6 months to build and 3 months to install in the ET ride. So next time you're flying over it, you better appreciate it because it is awesome. But after you fly over the city, you shoot through the stars, and this is where things start to get a little interesting because now you have arrived at the Green Planet. Now we're at the Green Planet, the second half of the ride, and this is where things start to get a little weird for most riders. Everything else that we've experienced on the ride so far has been very similar to the E.T. movie, and now we've gone a little off course on a brand new adventure. And this is on purpose. For Steven Spielberg, E.T. Adventure is kind of a sequel to the E.T. movie, where we actually get to see where E.T. lives, where he comes from. But prior to this ride, the Green Planet never really existed in physical form. So Steven Spielberg tasked Peter Alexander, the Universal creative executive producer leading the E.T. adventure, with creating a green planet that felt positive and organic. He didn't like the way sci-fi planets were represented in media in the 80s and 90s. In 1985, there was actually a book written called The Book of the Green Planet that served as the original continuation of the story. A lot of people point to this book as kind of like inspiration for the E.T. ride, and the truth is, not very much of this book is used for E.T. Adventure. In fact, the green planet that we see on the ride is very different than the one in the book. And I'll say that I've never read the book. I heard it wasn't very good. But what I've learned about the Book of the Green Planet is that it takes place immediately after the E.T. movie. E.T. goes back to his planet, the Green Planet, and also we find out a couple things about him. One, we find out that E.T. is actually 1,000 years old. So this like 1,000-year-old alien is like waddling around Earth like going, meh, like a big baby. And two, that E.T. is a master botanist on his planet. And after the events of everything that happened on planet Earth, he gets demoted to a lowly farmer. And basically the whole book, he just kind of wishes he was back on planet Earth with Elliot. The two biggest pulls from the Book of the Green Planet are Botanicus, E.T.'s teacher, which, according to the book, is 10,000 years old, and he is like a supreme scientist on E.T.'s planet, and E.T. is like his greatest student, which, now that I think about it, we see Botanicus in line for the ride, so he has come to Earth. So why doesn't Botanicus just take E.T. back himself? Why do we have to get on bikes to go through all this hubbub and get him back there? I don't know. And then the other thing that comes from the book are the creatures known as Tickly Moot Moot. Do you know the guys on the E.T. ride that kind of look like old and like shriveled up with like the crazy hair? And then Botanicus is with one of them when you enter the Green Planet for the first time, and he goes, "E.T., go to Tickly. Hurry." And then E.T.'s with one of them, he goes, "Tickly, ouch." That's a Tickly Moot Moot. And that's like all of them. They're all those types of aliens. They're Tickly Moot Moots. And I should say, E.T.'s other friends that we see on the ride don't come from the book. The singing mushroom known as Orbidon, you know, "Welcome home, you've arrived." And of course, how could we forget Magdoll, the scariest animatronic at Universal. Those two were made for the ride, and the easiest way to describe the visual inspiration for the Green Planet, which actually makes a lot of sense, is underwater. Peter Alexander used the ocean and all the coral reefs that he would swim through underwater as he was growing up as a child as the aesthetic for the Green Planet, which I can totally see as I go through the ride now. So even though there is a book about the Green Planet from the 80s, not much is taken from it. And then you reach the finale of the ride where you get to have your personal moment with E.T. as he thanks you personally by name. Remember when they asked your name and they gave you a little card? That's how E.T. knows your name. Oh my gosh, ruining the magic, I know. But once the team member collects your cards at the load station, they put it in a scanner, and with RFID magic, the computer that has the cards associates your ride vehicle with it. So when you pass E.T. at the end of the ride, RFID magic happens once again, and E.T. knows that you are on that car. E.T. has the power to say over 5,000 different names. So if he just ends up calling you friend at the ride, that's because he doesn't know how to say your name. And also, don't try to give the team members at the ride an obviously fake name when they're asking for it either. Otherwise, you'll just get friend-zoned by E.T. And now, we've arrived at the last section of this video, and this is kind of dedicated to some fun facts and stories about the E.T. ride that I couldn't really fit in the main narrative. There's some good stuff in here. Like, for example, do you remember when rides would have sponsors? It was a lot more obvious in the 90s and early 2000s, but Disney and Universal would often pair companies with their rides to have them help cover the costs of maintaining them. In exchange, the sponsor would get to put their brand on the ride in some way or another. For a while, the sponsor for E.T. Adventure was the old phone company AT&T, because E.T. Phone Home, duh! You would see their brand logo on the passport cards like this one here. The pre-show is another favorite part of the E.T. ride for a lot of people, and since the ride opened in 1990, it's actually had 3 different versions. The first version kind of went more with the backlot, behind-the-scenes movie-making aspect of the park. When you entered the building, you were considered actors for the E.T. sequel, and you were going with E.T. to get ready to film your next scene. It was then changed to be a little bit more immersive and focus on the story of the ride. This happened with the 20th anniversary of E.T. in 2002. And this is also when the aesthetics of the building also changed to be less of a soundstage and more of just like a celebration of the E.T. movie. This is the most current version of the pre-show that you see now. This one's kind of more of like a history fun fact, but the E.T. Adventure soundstage is the only one that still has the original soundstage colors of gray, blue, and pink. All the other ones at the front of the park have been painted yellow, It's most noticeable when you're walking back from the haunted houses at Halloween Horror Nights. That's the original Universal OG colors right there. This next one here, this is kind of like a random deep cut, but I thought it'd be fun to include in the video. This comes from my friends Kelly and Chris, and apparently, and way back when in 1992, Universal would have a big Christmas party for all of their annual pass holders. They gave out this pin with E.T. on it, and they gave out a children's book called Letters to E.T. Look at this, how cute. I don't really have anything to say about this book other than it was published in 1983, and this was a book featuring real letters that kids wrote to E.T. And our last fun fact takes us all the way over to Universal Studios Japan, where I wanted to briefly talk about their E.T. adventure. This version of the ride had the shortest lifespan. It was only open from 2001 to 2009. This version of the ride, from what I was able to find, was pretty similar to all the other E.T. rides, just maintained better because the Japanese take care of their theme parks a lot better. But something that was very unique about this ride, apart from it being in Japanese, was that after the ride closed in 2009, USJ actually held an exhibit called E.T. Adventure: The Legend, and this was a walkthrough experience where they would talk about E.T. and you would actually be able to get close and personal with some of the animatronics from the former ride. Now, I don't know how long this ran for, but the video I found on YouTube of this walkthrough was uploaded in 2010, a year after the ride closed. So it was set up pretty recently, and I think that's really cool. I think it's a really great way to pay tribute to a former ride in the park. And I wish the theme parks here in America did that more often. But apart from that, that is really all I've got. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I've never really done an attraction deep dive like this before, so hopefully you liked it, and if you did, let me know what other rides I should try to do this for next. And lastly, as a thank you to my wonderful Patreons who have been supporting me, I am going to thank you all personally by name in the style of E.T. at the end of the ride.
Goodbye, Ada, Adam and Rachel, Adrian and Catherine, Alex Delgado, Alex Steven, Alex Wells, Andrew and Carla Jackson, Ann Martin, Candace Dadswell, Jerry Sludok, C. Hosey 219.
Okay, it's a lot of you guys, okay? And I don't want to add another 10 minutes to this video, but thank you, Patreons, for being wonderful and amazing. I haven't acknowledged you guys in a video in a while, and I'm very sorry about that, but you guys really help me make some really great videos. And if you're looking to support me a little extra further, like all these wonderful people, please consider joining my Patreon. It's just $5 extra a month, and it goes towards a good cause. But apart from that, I am going to get on out of here. Thank you guys for watching another Vincent Vision, and
I'll be right here.
oh god, we're done with the ET impressions, okay? This is the only video I'm going to do these, all right? Bye-bye, everybody.